Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Big Little Small Talk, listeners. You're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and I have a household name with me today. Everyone will know her. Her name is Jenny Woodward. Welcome to Big Little Small Talk, Jenny Woodward.
Thank you, Megan. This is lovely to do this.
Are we talking 47 years in the media industry?
Oh,
Is it that
wow.
long?
Well, I started in 1975, so
It's nearly 50, isn't
nearly
it?
50.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of course, Jenny, you are a Toowoomba girl. You were born in Toowoomba. You're the fifth of six girls, I believe.
I was actually born in Brisbane at Ashgrove, which is not far from where I live now. But I am the fifth of six girls. We moved to Toowoomba when I was about 3. Dad did a bit of moving around at that stage and then eventually bought a business in Toowoomba and landed up there.
Right. What are your earliest memories of being in Toowoomba?
Being cold
And
being itchy because we wore wool, of course, and that was very itchy. But we had, when we first lived in Toowoomba, we lived in Margaret Street where the White Oaks Motel is. There was a house there and it had a huge backyard. Must have been on an acre or so, I don't know. And you seem to be able to walk forever to get to the back fence. And there were fruit trees, grapefruit trees, orange trees, and, it was in the era when people would, chop down a tree and then have a bonfire in the backyard. I can remember firecracker nights, Guy Fawkes nights in the backyard. I remember my sisters had a bring and buy sort of stand to save up money for the missions or something, and all sorts of like a little carnival set up in the backyard. So that house has some fond memories, and it had a blue Axminster carpet and fireplaces. One of my sisters had a fireplace in her bedroom, and we thought that was pretty special.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? Tell me about the dynamic of growing up in a family of 6 girls. You're the second youngest. Who was the boss of the girls?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I suppose in some ways my older sister I don't remember her going to school much. I'm sure that, I know she did, but I guess at that stage I was so little. I have stronger memories of her going off to work. She's about 10 years older than I am. So, yes, we seemed to come in little units. There were the older 2 and then the middle 2 and then Kim, who's the one younger than me, and me. So, and we played together and, yes, it was like the big girls and the little girls in the dynamic, yes.
Are you and Kim still called the babies?
No, but it's funny how the older ones always said later that we were spoiled because we got everything. We got biscuits for afternoon tea and we got cordial for afternoon tea, and I think probably having a family of 6 children wasn't much going to spare in terms of money. And so by the time the older ones had left and Mum and Dad had no doubt become more successful at their business, and yes, little opportunities were opened up to us that they missed out on.
Yeah. I mean, you'll hear that in every family, won't
sure,
you, that the younger ones as well. Did what sort of work, you said your father bought a business, what sort of work were they doing?
Well,
he originally was probably at home, was she?
Yes, she was. Dad was in insurance and managed an insurance office in Toowoomba eventually after moving around with that company for a while. And then they decided they wanted to settle in Toowoomba, so they bought a monumental masons business, Ziegler's, which still exists. And so they owned Ziegler's for a number of years. They actually bought it off the man who lived next door to us in Margaret Street, Mr. Mercer. And bizarrely, last year I met a woman who I've become friends with at work, and she is that man's granddaughter. How amazing is that, to have that
nice
connection?
Little circle of life,
yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
And so, because I was talking to her about my parents and said, Dad had bought this business, and she said, "What was the name of the business?" And when I told her, she went, "Oh, my goodness, Granddad owned that." So, so he had that business, and that was over in Mort Street, aptly named Mort Street for a mortuary, yes, a cemetery business, I suppose. And he would travel the state and particularly around the Downs but up to Mount Isa as well, and, do jobs in those areas. And he had a team of men who went around and installed them and did that work.
Interesting, because your father had served in PNG, hadn't he? And I read there that you've said about your father he was a shy man and suffered from huge anxieties. Did he speak about being in the war very much?
Not much, and the stories that he told us were all the fun stories, because Dad had a great sense of humour, and so we heard lots of fun stories. He used to tell us about how he and some mates had set up a little sort of craft stall at the start of the American mess where the men went in, because he said they weren't doing much. They were kind of waiting, and he was quite handy. So they'd fashion some bits and pieces out of local stuff, and they would sell this stuff to the Americans, who thought it was fantastic. And then he told a story where he gave, I think it was £600 to another man he knew was coming back to Brisbane on a boat. He gave it to him and asked him to give it to his parents, to his dad, and the money was duly delivered. Is that not amazing?
It is amazing. It truly is. And the little Mackie family, did you have a car?
Oh, yes. Dad liked cars, and he would change them every couple of years. And it was a station wagon where we were young, and Mum had a car as well. So, yes, they were in the Ford family when we were growing up. And so, yes, Dad liked driving, I suppose, because he'd been a commercial traveller for a while, and he enjoyed a drive, and we were all hop in the car and go for a drive. Or if he brought home a new car, we'd hop in the car and go for a drive.
Well, in the back of the station wagon, not too many seatbelts in those days.
No, and Kim and I would always be in the backpack on a long trip, yes, bouncing around with the luggage.
That's right, in the dog box. The reason I ask is because I wondered whether you always, as a family, went somewhere on holidays. Do you have
Yes, we did. We had relations who lived up in North Queensland, around Gordonvale. So we would get in the car and do the long slog up to North Queensland a couple of times, and everybody bouncing along in the car. And sometimes at that stage, my older sisters mightn't be with us, so it'd just be the four younger ones. We did that. I can remember going down to Sydney on a big trip where Mum and Dad planned it, and we stayed down there at a place that turned out to be a brothel as well. So they were rather horrified, but they obviously attracted a country clientele, and there were big breakfasts of spaghetti and baked beans for breakfast. But there were also other clientele that...
How did they find out that it was a brothel?
Well, I think they realised that there were a lot of people coming and going.
Shall we say that?
I didn't hear about that too much until I was older, but I think there was sort of the family folklore that yes, there were quite a few other people working there.
Interesting times. Now, you went to Mater Dei, didn't you? And not only did you go to Mater Dei, but you were the school captain of Mater Dei.
Well, you've done your research, haven't you?
Well, and I want to hear about school debating and verse speaking choir. What is verse speaking choir?
We had a wonderful speech and drama teacher who came to the school every week. Her name was Mrs. Wenzel, which was well known in Toowoomba. And we used to do poems with a whole choir of girls. So there might be 30 or 40 of us, and we would learn the poem, and we'd say it with expression as she directed us, and she would stand out the front and conduct as you would a musical choir. And I loved that, and I went to her for private lessons as well, and did speech and drama all the way through to kind of a university level, I suppose. And yes, lots of performances. We did a play every year at the end of the year, and participated in those things as well. And we also did the debating. And there were 3 of us on the team, and we did rather well under her guidance. And also the English teacher, I think, helped us with that too.
Right. Well, tell me then, what is a madrigal choir?
Madrigal songs come from a particular time in history, and they're unaccompanied songs, so you sing a cappella, and I can't tell you. I'm thinking they're probably like 16th, 17th century, but they may be earlier than that. I'm not sure. And we had a music teacher, Sister Patricia, who was a beautiful woman who was so talented. And she had a group of girls, I think there were about 15 of us in the group, and we sang complicated harmonies. And, we'd go to our rehearsals after school and wander over to the convent, which was just through the fence at the school. And we would learn these lovely old songs. And I'm just trying to think where we performed. I suppose we performed in the Stedfords and things like that. But, that was a lovely experience. And fortunately, a lot of my close friends were in the group, although we were a pretty small school, so everyone was a close friend to some degree. And it was very enjoyable, yes.
I must admit I've never heard of the Madrigal Choir, and I can't imagine whipping a whole group of young Catholic schoolgirls into doing it. But you obviously took it up.
Yeah, she was a lovely woman, and it was challenging musically, so I suppose we enjoyed that. And some of us had music lessons as well in as well as the classroom music. So yes, we were all pretty keen, and it went across the ages. So it wasn't just 1 year level; it was from grade 8 to 12.
Right. So that was at the high school, though, which was, have I got it right? Was it called Holy Angels?
No, the high school was called Mater Dei, and it was always Mater Dei at the primary school and the high school. The church was called Holy Angels as a distinction, and it kept that name officially, but everybody called it the Mater Dei Church until it sadly burnt down.
So the high school, was it a co-ed high school or was it only girls?
No, only girls, yes. Did the church burn down or was it just the school? Anyway, we had a fire in the science block when we were in grade 12. I think perhaps there was some issue with the way chemicals had been stored. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, there was a fire, and consequently the girls who were doing science, of which I was one, we walked up to Fairholme and had our lessons up there. So that was really nice.
Yeah. The reason I was asking, I suppose, is when you're in an all-girls school and you're putting on things like My Fair Lady, someone has to play the boys, like Henry Higgins. And who would that have been, I wonder?
That would have been me. And that was a lot of fun. It was an abridged version of My Fair Lady, a sort of a pinch from My Fair Lady, the musical, and because we wrote it, the students wrote it and put it together, and of course the original Pygmalion from George Bernard Shaw, and we created a show that kind of took us all the way up to where Eliza dances all night. And then we didn't take it any further than that because I think that ran about 40 minutes, and that was about the strength of our and I'm trying to remember who directed it. Probably it was Mrs. Wenzel, I assume. But that was heaps of fun, yes.
Yeah.
I still know all the words to all the songs.
Well, if we have time at the end, I might get you to do a little rendition for me. I'll just remind the listeners that you're on 102.7 FM. You're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to Jenny Woodward, OAM, weather communicator. We won't call her a weather girl or a weather woman.
I like that. I might have to use that.
Weather communicator. So lots of fun times at school. What did you do when you left school?
Well, when I left initially, I decided, in consultation with my parents, it was decided I would do a teaching degree, and I wasn't really that keen. So, but I did it, and I started, and I did 6 months of that. But Mum and Dad went on their first big overseas trip in that year. And while they were away for about 8 weeks, and while they were away, I thought, I've had enough of this, so I dropped out, and I had a bit of part-time work, and I decided that I would do the acting course the following year. So by the time they came home, it was a done deal, and I think Mum just sort of shrugged her shoulders because she had done some acting work herself and directing, so I think she understood why I liked it, and so they just accepted that, and that was fine.
Just tell me a little bit about your mum doing some directing and acting.
Mum had a very pretty singing voice, and she was, I suppose, a young woman during the war and participated in various concerts and stuff around Brisbane. And also she acted in plays at the Brisbane Repertory Theatre. And when she married Dad and they moved to Cairns. They were very heavily involved in the Cairns Repertory Theatre, and we found lots of old programs and bits and pieces with her name in it after she died. So she had a bigger involvement than we realised.
But were all six of you quite musical? Was the Mackie house just this lovely kind of...
Look, we were enthusiastic. I don't know that we were particularly good at it. But yes, most of my sisters could sing pleasantly. I mean, we can all sing reasonably pleasantly. A lot of us learned piano. We always had a piano in the house, but none of us were particularly good, some more than others. And my niece is a nice pianist. I've got a couple of nieces who play piano well. But yes, we put in a good effort, but we weren't actually ever going to be musical stars. But we did have a lot of concerts and plays that we would perform at home, and we'd make up little skits, and, you know, Dad would rig a curtain for us, and I don't know, we suppose we dug into various boxes around the house and found costumes, and then we would charge the neighbours money and, yes, and have a show.
Entrepreneurial family, aren't you, with the little stall in the backyard, and then your father's got the stall at the war and you're charging the neighbours for the show.
That's right.
I can see where you come from.
Well, we had to fund the lollies somehow.
That's right, yeah. So, Jenny, you were going to university at the DDIAE, as it was in those days. Were you the first person in your family to go to university?
No, my sister Leslie went to Teachers College, which is effectively university, and she, yes, was a teacher. And then I had two sisters who were nurses, but they had in-hospital training. My older sister worked in the bank, and, yeah, so we had quite a lot of higher education. And to Dad's credit, he didn't ever discourage us from doing that, or mums. I suppose they grew up in an era when not many women went off to uni, but we were very welcome to pursue those ideas if we wanted to. It was interesting growing up in that time, sort of 60s into 70s, that there was a lot of social change happening in the world at that time. I suspect my older sisters had a much more restricted life than Kim and I did, because times were changing as we went through.
Was university, was it free in that era?
Yes, it was. We were lucky. We went through in the free era. And so that
tell
was
me
great.
about, you made the change and you decided that you were going to study acting then.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, because I think that's how we got to where we are now.
Pretty well.
You know,
I mean, they had a 3-year drama course, very intensive, and we did movement and speech, and then we did a lot of shows. And the people who were studying drama full-time, of which I was one, would also participate in productions that were happening for other streams where people were doing it as an elective or part of teaching or a BA or something like that. So it was pretty well 9 to 5, you know, every day, and rehearsals at night. It was intensive, and we worked really hard, and we put on some terrific productions. I did a children's theatre major within that, and they had a bus and had a company called the Acme Sausage Company, and that toured all around the Downs, and we would go to schools and put shows on at various schools. So there was a lot of community engagement, as we would call it these days. So that was terrific, and there was some adventures in the, and as you can know, it was an old London bus, so it was very uncomfortable. And I remember one ill-fated trip when we went, I think we went to Thallon, and there'd been a lot of rain, and the roads were quite narrow, and we came off the road and hit the dirt, and the bus slid and got bogged. Fortunately, it didn't roll over, but we all had to get out of the bus and then push to try so that the driver could try and get it back on the bitumen. I think workplace health and safety are like that very much these days.
No, let alone seatbelts or anything like that.
No, nothing like that.
So when you got there and you were doing this and you're having lots of fun, did you think, you know, this is my tribe, I've found my people?
Very much so,
Yeah.
yes. I knew, and I knew that I wanted to do acting when I left school, but Mum said, well, you know, you can do that, but you need something to fall back on, the classic. So that's why I started teaching, but I really didn't enjoy it at all. Yeah.
And who did you meet while you were studying at DDIAE, who still features fairly heavily in your life?
Well, I met my husband, and he was doing a Bachelor of, well, he started doing photography, and that course kind of disappeared. while he was there. So he then moved over to a literature degree, and our lives sort of intersected and intertwined while we were there. And, we started going out, and we were sort of on again, off again, as you are frequently at that time of your life. And yes, fortunately he came to his senses. And
okay, good. So tell me about how we go from doing an acting course to being Australia's longest serving weather presenter.
Well, when I was studying, I picked up a job at Channel 10 in Toowoomba, DDQ 10, as it was then, or 1045A, people would know it as, or Great Eastland Television. It went through a lot of incarnations.
DDQ 1045A.
Yes, very catchy. But I loved working there. It was such a great team. It was dynamic. We had a fabulous boss who was eager for us to be like a metropolitan station. So we had a lot of things going on. There were children's shows, there were variety shows, there were cooking shows, morning coffee shows, news, weather, the lot. And I started working there as a hostess, I suppose, was my title. And I did weather, I did community announcements that we'd record and they'd be played out at midday. I think I was doing weekend weather to start with. I worked there, and I also worked in a hotel cleaning the bars in the morning. So I'd do that in the morning and then go home and then go and be a weather girl at night. When I finished my degree, I got a job with a company that worked out of the university in Armidale. They had a travelling sort of playhouse company, and I worked with them for about 6 or 8 months, I suppose. It was a pretty unhappy time, not just for me, very unhappy company. So ultimately I made my way back to Toowoomba, and Doug and I were still on and off again at that stage. And so I made my way back to Toowoomba, and I went and saw Laurie Burrows, who was the manager, and said, is there any chance of full-time work? And he put me on. So I was in TV, full-time, production, all of those shows, and he made me a producer, totally inexperienced, didn't have a clue, but kind of learnt on the way. And, we were all learning on the way. We had a couple of terrific cameramen, which was great, who had really good ideas. And then we just kind of tried to work it out as we went along. So it was a great training ground.
Yeah. Okay, so fill in the little bits in between for me.
So then when Doug and I got married, which was in 1981, and he was in Brisbane on the family property, there was no way that I didn't want to have a long-distance relationship. So I left 1045A and got a job at Channel 7 at the Wombat program, which was the sort of one of the leading children's programs at the time. And they employed me as a director's assistant, which is actually quite a technical job where you have to be in the studio, timing out stories, helping the director, and doing very precise work. And they realised, and I realised very quickly, that I was not suited to that role. It wasn't a role I'd actually done before, but I obviously talked my way into the job. So they then moved me to be Dina's assistant, which was great. So Dina was the producer of the show, Dina Brown, and I learned so much from her. And we produced 5 Wombat programs every week. It was full on. There was content, location content, and then studio content. And we would write scripts for little plays. There'd be guests. It was a big show. And one of the sort of I suppose, feature children's programs of the 7 networks. It was great to work on that show. And then I became pregnant a couple of years in and decided I didn't want to work full-time anymore. And so I left and had my first child. And then after I think he might have been about 2, and I thought, I'm a bit over this. I'd been trying to do a bit of over, not working. I'd done a bit of freelance, but that was really challenging. And then an ad turned up in the paper that the ABC were looking for a weather presenter. And I thought, oh, I've done weather before. I'll have a go at this. So I auditioned and ultimately got the job.
And that, they say, is history,
yes,
because you're still there.
I'm still there. I know I wasn't their first choice, which is kind of interesting.
How do you know that?
I found out about it later, yes. So
and what's happened to the first choice person?
I don't know. She worked in the industry for a while. I don't know what she does now, but yes. But anyway, I'm very pleased that she didn't take the job and I got it, yeah.
So I know when you were awarded your OAM at the beginning of this year, I read something where you said, I am really proud of it because there aren't very many older women represented in the media. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, I think that the media is fairly unkind to women, and I think women are held to a different standard than men are held to. And so I'm grateful to have worked at the ABC where they value your work more than your looks. And I think that that's, or your gender. And I think that that's been really great for me. I mean, we've seen examples of people being kind of shuffled out without any apparent reason apart from a shuffling of the deck in Brisbane in the last few weeks, and, experienced, looks gorgeous, does a great job, and all of a sudden you go to work and then you don't have a job that night and you think, wow. But I know that it could happen at the ABC, but it's a long time since it has happened. Yes. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for I work with a lot of women. There are a lot of women in the Brisbane newsroom. The producing team is largely female at this stage. It wasn't always the case because I've worked there for nearly 40 years now. We've had terrific men at the helm as well, but just the way that it's going, there are a lot of women who are now working into their later career, and they have all that experience and all of that knowledge. And so at the moment, we have a really strong female team.
It's an incredible situation to be in any job for that long, but particularly here in media. I know I've interviewed Lee Faulkner from Triple M, who's been there for a really long time, and I said to him, how do you stay relevant? And he said, you just have to get modern. You have to stay with whatever's coming along. Do you agree with that?
I do agree. And I mean, we've undergone massive change, technological change, since I've started doing the weather, and changes in the looks. We've just had a new change this week, and you can't afford to lament what's past. You have to think, right, this is the new thing. I'm on board and I'm going to learn as much about this as I can. And that keeps the job interesting too, of course. So I agree. You have to keep looking forward. There is no point in looking back.
Tell me about how things have changed. I did read an article that you'd written about how you used to stick the numbers with a little bit of rolled up sticky tape onto the board at the back of you.
That was in Toowoomba. When I first started, we had this very old black and white board, which was a series of 3 boards stacked together with long hinges and spring-loaded catches that you'd pull to make them open and close. But colour television was on the way, and so we were on the last legs of this particular piece of set, and so nothing had been done to it. And we had these little magnetic numbers that would stick to these boards if the magnets were in place, but the magnets had fallen off half the numbers and you had to kind of attach them to the board. So
was that the temperature, was it?
Yes, it would be the temperature and the conditions. You'd have W or SHWS for showers, and that's how it was up on this board, and the numbers. And so we'd stick them on before we went into the studio, when we went into the studio as our preparation. And so consequently, if you didn't operate the board correctly, the board would slam and then the numbers would fall off and hit the floor. So we were very careful about how we attached the numbers. Fortunately, that only lasted for a few months, I think, and then we got a new board. It might have been 6 months later. But yes, it was pretty funny at the time. Now I think about it. But I was so enamoured with, here I am, I'm on TV, and this is exciting, and I didn't even think anything about it until later. And I thought, oh, that was actually pretty awful. Yes.
Yeah, well, I suppose you make do with whatever you've got at the time.
That's right.
If you're recognising this voice, you're right. It's someone that you know and love. It's Jenny Woodward. Thanks for tuning into Big Little Small Talk with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. We're up to the stage where Jenny is going with the newest trends in whatever's happening weather-wise. Tell me about when you used to have to go out to the BOM and you'd have to drive along Coronation Drive and how the facts changed your life.
When I first started at the ABC, we were located at Toowong, and the first job of the afternoon was to go to the bureau and pick up the weather maps, the chart, the satellite photo, and to have a briefing with a forecaster. And so I would go into Ann Street where they had their building, drive in there, chat, but you couldn't chat. You couldn't go before 4:30 because they were doing forecasts and they issued forecasts at 4:30, and then you could go in and talk to them. And then, I might be finished at 5, gather up all my bits, and then you just hit peak hour traffic. And so then it would be that kind of slow crawl back along Corro Drive, looking at your watch thinking, oh, this is not going well, and trying to assemble your thoughts about what you're going to say so you can write it quickly when you got back. So sometimes it might take you half an hour, so you wouldn't get there until 5:30. I know one time a boss came to me and said, you really need to sort of get this organised earlier. I'm thinking, you don't understand what's going on here, do you? So when the fax machine came, it was fantastic because it meant I didn't have to do that. I could have those images faxed to me and I could just chat to the forecaster on the phone, which is something I still do every day.
Right. So how many forecasters have you seen come and gone in your time? It'd have to be hundreds, wouldn't it?
Well, it wouldn't be hundreds, but it would be dozens.
Some you get on better with than others?
Oh, look, they're all so generous with their time. And because I knew nothing about the weather when I started, I really knew nothing. They have educated me about the weather over the years, so much so that it sort of got to a point when a new person came on after I'd been doing it for about 20 years, and he talked to me and was telling me what was going on, and I sort of came back with a few questions, and he said, oh, you actually know what you're talking about. And I thought, yes, I've done it. I've passed.
I do.
I've got my certificate, yes.
You were throwing in your Southern Oscillation Index and acronyms and whatever you could, were you?
I forget what I'd said, but I remember feeling so proud of myself. I thought, oh, I've graduated, yes.
Do those forecasters brief other weather people, other stations?
Well, they certainly talk to other stations and they have chats on the radio, largely with ABC. I honestly don't know if they talk to the commercial stations because I'm doing my thing at that time of day. But I think probably I might be one of the few people that they give an extensive briefing to. But yes, I feel very grateful and privileged, I suppose, that they always pick up the phone when I call, and it doesn't matter how dumb the question is. They never make me feel stupid or think, oh, why is she asking this? So they're just terrific and they explain things so well.
It's wonderful, isn't it? I don't know that when I was a child I would have ever thought that I would know. Is it Phelan Hennessy? Who's
Phelan Hennessy.
Phelan Hennessy.
He's
you'd know
Irish,
the name.
yes.
They are sort of a part of our life.
I know, yes.
Like you are.
Yes, I think people do know. And they're the people that brief me. Phelan and Harry Clark and who else? Shane Kennedy. So there's names that people would know.
Jenny, what I was really, really surprised to read is that the weather only goes for 2.5 minutes. Is that right? Give or take?
Give or take. It's changed a bit now. We've extended it out to 3 minutes because we've got the photos and I just needed some time to get those photos in. But fundamentally, it's sort of a 3-minute weather these days. That is flexible on a daily basis. If the news is really busy and maybe the weather's not too crazy, then the producer might say to me, can you give me some time? And so I might give them 15 or 20 seconds, sometimes 30 seconds if they're really pushed, and vice versa. I know when I walked into the studio last night, the producer said to me, oh, we've got an extra 10 seconds. Can you use that? I said, sure, love to. So you just have to be flexible.
Do you ever say no to an extra 10 seconds?
Never, never.
Now, I could not mention the fashion. Because Jenny Woodward fashion, everybody's got something to say about it.
Everyone has an opinion.
I read how you said everyone likes to help you with your fashion. Is that
yes?
something?
Well, I suppose that I've got a pretty set look these days, and so I don't get as much commentary on it.
How would you describe the look?
I usually wear a pretty straight dress, usually a floral, because I like bringing some colour into the news, and I can do it because even though the weather's serious, I think it's nice for people to have something kind of colourful. The newsreaders don't wear a lot of pattern, but I wear a lot of pattern and it suits me. And then I'll have usually a plain jacket over the top, or I'll have a slim skirt on and a shirt and a jacket over the top.
Always a bit of heel there?
A little bit of heel.
A little bit,
nothing too crazy.
What about you're not a fan of the trouser?
No, and
I'm not a fan, she says.
I'm not a fan of the trouser. No, I just don't think they look good on me. So I occasionally wear them, very occasionally, but not often.
Does somebody dress you? Do people give you clothes
No,
to
because
wear?
we can't do that. Being the ABC, it's just not the way that things work. I get a clothing allowance, which I can spend as I see fit. which is great. I've had a stylist help me over the years and kind of refine my look, because prior to that I was floundering a bit, and you'd buy something and think, oh, that really doesn't look very good. And then you'd wear it a couple of times because you felt you had to justify the purchase. And so now I'm much stricter if I think, no, that's no good. I mean, I have had people write into me and offer me suggestions on what they think I should be wearing.
What do they say?
Oh, usually they're older, and, you know, they'll tell me that that didn't suit and perhaps I might like to wear this, and send me a picture, and I'll go, not until hell freezes over would I wear that. But I write back to them very politely and say, thanks for your advice. You know, I'll consider it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't ever find it offensive that people are commenting on
Look,
your look, or you're just used to it now?
Look, I think if you get it, I mean, I used to get really hurt sometimes when I was younger, but these days I just think, look, this is me. Take me or leave me. It's not the main job. It's a fun part of the job, and I certainly enjoy the whole clothes aspect. But the main part of the job is getting the information out there, and that's what I like to concentrate on. And why be offended? You know, what's the point?
Yeah, how are you going to track down all of them?
Yeah.
Because you love to sew, and you sew a lot of your own clothes, and you love the vibrant fabrics.
Yes, I don't wear much that I've sewn on TV, though, because the things that I can sew successfully are not the sort of things that I would normally wear on TV. But I certainly make things for occasions. You know, when I got my OAM, for example, I wore an outfit that I had made and then just put a jacket over the top. And so if I like making tops and skirts that kind of fit what I like, and bright and vibrant. It's very satisfying.
Oh, I can imagine.
But
yeah.
very frustrating. It's like when you buy things and you bring it home and you think, oh, that's great, and then whenever you go to the wardrobe, you never put it on your body because you think, oh, that wasn't quite right. Same thing happens with sewing, or you think it's all going well, and then something, you can't just make it fit properly. So you have to, as my friend says, make sacrifices to the sewing gods, you know, regularly.
Now, you mentioned getting your OAM, and there's a few awards in your back pocket. When you got the 2004 Queensland Media Award, what did that mean to you?
Look, I was really chuffed with that. I'd had help with the story, and it was something that I had not anticipated. And
was it for a particular story?
It was for a particular story that I'd done about the Southern Oscillation Index and how farmers were using it and what impact it would have. So I was really chuffed with that, because I felt like it had pushed me out of being a presenter, weather reporter, into another area. And that's something that I've done bits of over the years, even though the presenting and the weather is the main thing. There are other things that I was able to show that I could do other things.
No, I just made up that Southern Oscillation Index thing because it's the only weather term I know. But do you, quite seriously, ever get abused because people say, oh, well, you got that wrong, love? You said it was going to rain today.
Not really. And if people do say that, then it's in a more kind of joking way, I suppose. And I really do see myself as a messenger. I'm not creating the forecasts. I'm giving you the information that the BOM have spent, you know, thousands of people have been working on that forecast, and that is their best forecast that they can give. And I think the BOM gets a pretty tough rap because they do a terrific job. And I know because I watch it. I mean, there's the odd day when you wake up and you think, oh, this wasn't on the forecast. But more often than not, it's right. I think people just are very focused on where they live. And if I'm saying there'll be some showers about and they don't get a shower in their backyard, well, they think it's wrong. But the districts we're talking about are huge. So there could have been showers all over the place and it just missed out on your places. Many farmers would know.
I think that's probably one of my pet peeves is the Bureau doesn't know what they're talking about.
The Bureau do know what they're talking about. And I know that they spend a lot of time and care, and they have a lot of excellent computer modelling that helps them to make the predictions. And then you've got people who are fine-tuning those forecasts because of local knowledge. And that's why Southeast Queensland is quite a tricky area to forecast for, because you've got all of that sort of cold air mass coming from the north, from the south, and then you've got the hot air coming from the north. So it's quite volatile, particularly in summer. And thunderstorms, you know, there'll be a forecast for thunderstorms, but to say it's going to be here, here and here is not really a viable option. You know, they're telling us. So you have to take some personal responsibility for keeping an eye on the radar or just listening out for the warnings, having the warning app on your phone. So there are ways that you can make use of those forecasts.
Not just the rainfall chart on your fridge anymore. It's
No,
much more complicated.
It's much more complicated.
Now, you made reference to that you can sing all right, you go all right singing, but what was the Weather Quarter?
The Weather Quarter was a little program that we made when the news channel was first launched, which I think was back in 2010. And the ABC knew that they needed 24-hour content for the channel. And they obviously had their big programs coming out of largely Sydney, but they also wanted some diversity in the content. So they established all of these little quarter programs, which were 15 minutes on a whole range of topics, of which weather was one. I remember there was finance and maybe science. There were lots of them. And so I put my hand up and they put a call out for anyone who might be interested in doing something. So I put my hand up and said, how about a weather quarter? So we made a little 15-minute weather program that went maybe initially it was quite often. It was like every 2 weeks. And then as the channel became more established, it was sort of monthly. And I did that for about, I think maybe 3 years. We were doing regular programs. So that was great to do.
Well, I've got all my weather references all boxed up because what I really wanted to ask you about was weathering well.
No, that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
Tell me about that weathering.
I decided a couple of years ago I wanted to hark back to my acting roots and, I suppose explore that again. And my son is a theatre producer, Alex, and he was doing lots of shows around town. And I kept saying to him, you need to give me a role in something. Why don't you give me a role? And eventually he did. I think he wanted me to just stop nagging him. And it was in a musical. And I had to sing a song. And I thought, okay, this is okay. So I put my hand up and I said, yes, I'll do it. That'd be great. But I did say to him, if I'm terrible, you must tell me and I will be grateful. I won't be offended. So, and he said, you'll have to have singing lessons. I said, you bet I have to have singing lessons.
Mrs. Wessel or whoever it was? Mrs. Seisel or?
No, that she was much older. No, I had singing lessons from a guy at the con, one of Alex's singing teachers, John Peel, and he was terrific. So he really helped me find my voice, I suppose. And we used to have lessons over at not far from where Alex was studying. And then one day he said, Alex is here, I'll get him to come in and have a listen to you. And I said, okay. And I said, okay, in front of someone else. And he said, well, you'll be doing it in front of an audience. So I sang for Alex and John, who was teaching me. And Alex looked at me and he said, I didn't know you could do that, Mum. And so you're fine. That's great. So I kind of got the tick from him. So that and I did the show and I really enjoyed it. And it gave me a kind of window back into stage work, which I hadn't done for forever. That ignited a bit of interest in maybe extending into something bigger. I'd been doing lots of talks for group around, Probus clubs and this and that with a slideshow. So I decided that perhaps we could take that material and expand it and create a more theatrical version of that. So with Alex's help as a producer, he got a director on board, he got a musician on board. We got professionally designed graphics, not a little PowerPoint from my laptop. And we created a show, a proper stage show, which was a one-woman show, which I toured all around Queensland. It was just awesome.
And you loved it, obviously.
I loved it, yes. I was terrified, genuinely terrified coming out because the first shows were at the Powerhouse, in the theatre there, and you've got 600 people who've paid money to come and see you. And I just thought, no, this will be okay, because we had rehearsed. I was very well rehearsed and I had a terrific musician on stage with me, Jake Bristow, who sang as well and supported the whole thing with music. And people kept coming back and telling their friends. We had about 6 sold-out houses at the Powerhouse. We toured around Queensland. We had a couple of tours, had a few COVID interruptions here and there, but it was a wonderful experience. And I got to meet so many people around Queensland. It was terrific.
Are we going to do Weathering Well too?
Look, I have kind of talked to Alex about that. Maybe. I'm not saying no to that, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, unfortunately, I'm running out of time, and I did want to hear about you being approached by federal Labor in 2010 to run for a federal seat. Which seat was it?
I'm pretty sure it was Ryan.
Didn't have any desire to go into.
I couldn't imagine myself in that role. I was so taken aback when they asked me, because it was a bit sort of secret squirrel when they rang me and, blah, blah. So I had a meeting with someone, not really knowing what the meeting was going to be about. I thought they were actually going to tell me some story that I could, I thought, this will be good. And then I thought, oh, wow, okay. And I thought, oh, no, this is not for me. Mm.
Was it a prouder moment perhaps when you had the geranium, the Jenny Woodward geranium named after you?
Oh, look, that was so delightful. I mean, imagine having a flower named over yourself. It's just...
Do you have any Jenny Woodward geraniums in the back? It's pink, I believe.
It is pink. I have some, but they are not in flower at the moment. But fortunately, I'm a terrible, terrible gardener. But my sister is pretty good. So she keeps Jenny alive, and every now and then she strikes a couple of Jennies for me and they turn up here, which is great.
I'll have to try and get one for it's about one of the only things I can grow with some grave water. Look, we're coming to the end of our time, but I always ask every guest that I have who their favourite royal is. Jenny, are you a royal watcher?
This is a very left of field question, Megan, but fortunately you gave me a bit of a heads up where I would have been completely thrown, but I had to think about it. And I guess if I had to choose one, I would pick Sophie, Edward's wife. She was the Countess of Wessex, but I think she's now she's moved, aren't they, something, maybe she's the...
I don't know her official title.
No, I don't know her official title.
That dropped off the sort of the duty list a little bit lately. They were being pushed forward, yes. But Jenny, you need to do some research.
Clearly, but I just think that she's always smiling. She always seems to hold herself with such grace and clearly works hard. And I think, I think you're a really lovely woman. She comes across as a lovely woman, yes. So I would pick her, yes.
Well, there you are. See, the reason I ask the question is because people often say the qualities that they hold dear themselves, and you hold yourself well and work hard and all of that. It's very yes. What about dancing? I know that you love to have fun and love to sing and dance. What's a song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
Look, I suppose if I had to pick a song, there'd be lots of songs that would put me on the dance floor, but if I picked a song from kind of recent history, let's go with Happy, Pharrell Williams. How can you not dance to that?
All right. Well, that's the song that we'll play for you, Jenny. Look, thank you so much for making your time available for me today. It's just been such a joy, and I know that listeners will hear your voice and recognise who it is, because you're a household name. You're a part of our lives every night. There you are, and so thank you for being that one consistent thing in everybody's lives for so many years.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.